Rhyn ap Iorwerth.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Llywydd. Di'r Prylywydd. We know that uncertainty is bad for business, which in itself is a condemnation of the way the referendum was held without homework having been done, because it was inevitable that it was going to take years to resolve Brexit. Yes, there's been a slippage to the original timetable, but there was going to be a period of years anyway, so it was inevitable that period of uncertainty, as the Minister has said, would lead to the kind of delayed investments that we've seen harming the Welsh economy, a reduction in inward investment, and so on. And I think as we look to the potential of a no-deal Brexit, and certainly changes then to an acute period of potential disaster for some businesses in Wales. I've spoken in this chamber many times about the mussel exporters exporting 97% of their produce live and needing to get it through to continental Europe within 17 hours of getting them out of the sea. That's the kind of sector that just can't cope with any delay. However limited at ports. And I'm thinking of other businesses in my constituency that are exporters to the European Union who will become less competitive because of either practical issues of the ability of getting their products to market, or tariff issues that perhaps makes them uncompetitive. And these are very real problems that my constituents face. The Minister referred to the funding, £500 million available through the Development Bank of Wales across various funds accessible to small and medium-sized businesses. I wonder if you could explain what measures are being put in place to allow emergency access as a safety net to businesses that really do find themselves hitting the buffers in terms of lost sales and lost exports, perhaps, if we do leave without a deal. We sometimes forget, and it's worth reminding ourselves, that Wales is a net exporter to the European Union. And it's a reminder that we need to bear in mind Wales's specific circumstances when we discuss Brexit. I fear that the debate that was had in those brief months in 2016 was largely an English question. Other areas that were asked the question considered, what does it mean for us? Gibraltar were asked exactly the same question as Wales. And they voted 95% to remain because they could see, hold on, this is clearly bad for Gibraltar. Unfortunately, I think the Welsh issue got mixed up with English questions. But I digress somewhat. On transport, I am pleased to hear that preparations have been made to ensure ease of passage for vehicles across the A55 after October the 31st, and that roadworks will be cleared to make sure that there aren't any additional obstacles for increased traffic volumes or for the problems that the traffic will encounter on the way to Holyhead. Perhaps you could give us a little bit more detail on the steps that are being taken, though, to, in your words, minimise the impact of disruption at the port of Holyhead on local traffic specifically, because we know capacity in Holyhead is around 600 lorries. There are plans that have been explained to us previously to have a couple of extra places available to increase that to around 1,000 heavy goods vehicles. But there is potential of problems within the locality of the port that has traffic problems as it is. So I would be grateful for some more detail on that. And also, although Downing Street's latest proposals on the Irish border question have been described as a non-starter by most people involved in those discussions, what consideration has Welsh Government given to the effect on movement of trade of those latest ideas on how to deal with the border on the island of Ireland, and how that could have an impact on us in Wales?
Well, can I thank Rhyn ap Iorwerth for his questions and his contribution. Dealing with that last point first, clearly the UK government is already in something of a mess over its proposals or speculated proposals for dealing with the Irish border. And anybody looking at the news today will be questioning how on earth border checks could not constitute a return to having a hard border on the island of Ireland. And therefore, I'm afraid it would appear that the proposals being put forward by the Prime Minister will be met with complete disregard by the EU27, given the clear and consistent position that our European partners have taken in this regard. And therefore, all of our assessments concerning the likely impact of such a programme of border control being implemented from earlier in the year stand today. Rhynap Iorwerth is right to say that the uncertainty of the divorce from the European Union will, in all likelihood, last for years. Many eminent academics were saying during the referendum campaign, of course their voices were not heard by many, unfortunately, but they were saying consistently and powerfully, in my view, that it would take years for the divorce to take place and then for subsequent arrangements for new trading agreements to be reached. And during that period, the Welsh and UK economy could only shrink because of the uncertainty and the disruption caused by this. And Rhynap Iorwerth is absolutely right that problems that we now face today are owed directly to the binary choice that was offered to voters in the referendum between the certainty of the status quo and nothing more than an idea without any detail. These are two options that people were presented with without any regard to the option of reforming further the EU. And I think also if the government of the day had been able to at least propose some form of a deal with the EU and to give that option to the people of the UK, there would have been a better informed decision by the people. I also think that that would have led to a Remain vote being successful. We are where we are, though, and the Welsh Government is making great strides in preparing for a no-deal Brexit. We must do, it's our responsibility. And in terms of the funding that may be made available, to date, the Kingfisher project, which identifies those businesses at risk of closing, those businesses that could be moving away from our shores, has only gathered and shared intelligence. We've been saying to the UK government that to back up Project Kingfisher, money has to be made available. It's our estimate that in order to deal with the calls on Welsh government for emergency support, we would need to see the Economy Futures Fund increased from current 10 million to 35 million as a minimum. And I hope that the UK government will respect that when it considers what sort of funding to be made available. But this would only be a small part of the response and the financial support that this government would be required to give to businesses across Wales. In addition, we have the Development Bank, and as I've already said, they have at their disposal over £500 million of various funds that could be utilised to support businesses. At the moment, the Development Bank is looking how it is able to ensure that staff are redeployed to the front line in the event of a no-deal Brexit. They're looking at around about 200 members of staff being moved to frontline services. In addition, Business Wales have confirmed that they're ready to divert 200 members of staff there, in addition to 74 who are already operational. And the Welsh Government, in addition, within my department alone, is looking at redeploying 100 members of staff. More than 500 people being deployed to an area of activity that could have been avoided. In terms of the A55, I can tell members today that I recently made a very difficult decision to postpone a project of enhancing the road surface along one particular stretch of the A55 because the work was programmed to take place in the week that we could crash out of the EU. I did not wish to see disruption on the A55 whilst there is also disruption at the port of Holyhead as a consequence of crashing out of the EU. There are real implications in postponing roadworks. It means that the backlog only increases. It means that at a later date there will be more disruption as a consequence of vital roadworks having to be undertaken. And that particular work that was going to be programmed for late October would have led to a reduction in road noise for properties adjoining the A55. It is work that I wish we could have progressed with, but as a consequence of where we are on Brexit, we had to take the responsible decision and pause that particular intervention. Over at the port of Holyhead, Rhun ap Iorwerth is absolutely right that on site and with another area that we have been able to secure, there will be room for just under 1,000 HGVs. In the event that additional space is required, our proposals are to utilise the westbound carriageway of the A55 and to have contraflow traffic on the eastbound A55 at the port. We wish to minimise disruption at the port of Holyhead, but we cannot guarantee that in the event of hauliers not obtaining appropriate documentation, that they won't be turned back and that they won't be stacked. But we wish to avoid this if at all possible. Indeed, we are working with the ferry operators who in turn are working with haulage businesses, and I'm pleased to say that there are now signs across the border on key arteries in England for haulage firms to take good notice of on the M6 and other motorways in England, urging haulage firms to ensure that they have the right documentation at the end of October when they arrive at Holyhead Port.